June 19, 1944, when his M4 Sherman was hit by a large caliber gun, forcing him to bail out. He ran to a second tank, which was immobilized by a landmine after advancing only 30 yards. Neeman then took command of a third Sherman and succeeded in penetrating the Japanese positions. C Company, however, lost 6 Shermans and suffered 14 casualties in a single day. The 4th Marine Division, which had landed 4 days prior, had lost 23 of its 68 tanks within a week, nearly 1/3 of its armor strength, largely due to Japanese mines. Neeman observed that Japanese engineers had saturated the approaches to every defensive position on Saipan with anti-tank mines, anti-personnel mines, and improvised explosives. Marine combat engineers using metal detectors cleared paths slowly and were constantly under fire, often being outnumbered. Tanks frequently advanced past the cleared lanes and were destroyed or immobilized by mines. The 4th Tank Battalion desperately needed a faster method for mine clearance. Neeman recalled reading about British mine flail tanks, such as the Scorpion and Crab designs, which used rotating chains to detonate mines ahead of the vehicle. Since all British equipment was in Europe supporting the Normandy operations, the Marines had no access to them. After the fighting on Saipan, the 4th Marine Division moved to Maui for rest and refit in late 1944, preparing for the next Japanese-held island assault, which soon intelligence indicated would be Iwo Jima. Reports confirmed that the Japanese were heavily fortifying Iwo Jima, meaning more minefields and more casualties for the Marines. In November, walking through the motor pool on Maui, Neeman saw a damaged M4A2 dozer tank named Joker, which was scheduled for the scrap heap. The Marine Corps was transitioning to the newer M4A3 model. Looking at the broken tank and the adjacent truck park, where parts were being stripped from damaged vehicles, Neeman conceived an idea. The next morning, Neeman presented his concept to his officers: a Sherman tank with a rotating drum mounted on the front, from which chains would hang and beat the ground, safely detonating any buried mines. The key challenge, as Lieutenant Bob Reed pointed out, was how to power the rotating mechanism, since the tank engine only drove the tracks. Neeman was determined to figure it out as they went and asked for volunteers willing to modify government property. Gunnery Sergeant Sam Johnston, the battalion's top mechanic with experience keeping Shermans running since Guadalcanal, immediately stepped up. Johnston said he could make it work with the help of Staff Sergeant Ray Shaw, the Chief Maintenance NCO, and free access to the vehicle graveyard. Neeman authorized them to requisition whatever they needed. After 2 days of searching, Johnston and Shaw located the necessary component in a destroyed 2.5-ton truck, an intact rear axle and differential. The 6-foot axle with a central differential was perfect, as the differential would allow it to rotate freely. They hauled it back to the motor pool. The plan was to weld a heavy steel frame to the front of the Joker, where the dozer blade had been attached. The truck axle would be mounted horizontally on the frame, with the differential acting as the rotation point. Chains would be attached to the axle at intervals, and when spun at high speed, they would beat the ground and detonate mines. To power the flail, Johnston salvaged the small and tough transmission from a wrecked Jeep. He then took the drastic, court-martial-worthy step of cutting a 4-inch hole through the Sherman's frontal armor, left of the bow machine gun. A drive shaft was run from inside the tank through this hole to the flail's differential. Inside, the drive shaft was connected to the salvaged Jeep transmission, which was then meshed with the Sherman's own drivetrain using gears and belts. The bow gunner would control the flail's engagement, disengagement, and rotation speed, while the dozer blade's old hydraulic controls would raise or lower the entire assembly. The 127th Naval Construction Battalion on Maui, with their skilled metalworkers and welding equipment, agreed to help fabricate the complex structures, an unofficial instance of Marines aiding Marines. After 3 weeks of work, by early December, the vehicle sat in the motor pool looking like an M4 Sherman with a medieval weapon, specifically a truck axle with 3-foot-long chains sticking out the front. Crude welds covered the frame. Fixed steel plates were added later to encase the differential housing, but not yet. Johnston test-fired the mechanism in the motor pool. The Jeep transmission engaged, and power flowed to the differential. The axle began to spin, and centrifugal force made the chains whip around in a blur, creating a loud roar that drew the attention of mechanics. The controls worked perfectly, raising, lowering, and speeding up or slowing down the chains. The question remained whether the mechanism could withstand the force of actual mine explosions. Division commanders, recognizing the potential for saving lives on Iwo Jima, authorized an unusual live test in mid-December. Marine engineers laid a test minefield half a mile from the motor pool, burying 30 to 40 yards of deadly ground with Japanese Type 93 anti-tank mines captured on Saipan, placing them at varying depths and clusters to simulate actual combat conditions. Word spread, and about 100 men, including officers, tankers, and infantry marines, gathered to watch. The Joker, with Johnston ready at the flail controls and an experienced driver at the wheel, sat ready. Neeman watched from 50 yards away. Johnston engaged the flail, and the axle spun up to speed. The driver eased the Sherman forward at about 2 miles per hour. The spinning chains hit the ground, digging furrows with tremendous force. The first mine detonated with a massive explosion, obscuring the tank in smoke and dust. But the Sherman emerged, still moving forward, with the chains still spinning. Another explosion followed, then another. The flail was successfully finding and triggering every mine safely ahead of the vehicle. The improvised weapon worked exactly as designed, crawling forward through continuous detonations and clouds of ash. The tank successfully emerged on the far side after about 40 yards, and Johnston shut down the mechanism. Inspecting the vehicle, they found that the tank was intact, though covered in dirt and scorch marks, and the frame held solid. However, shrapnel from one of the mine explosions had penetrated the underside of the differential casing, a clear, unacceptable vulnerability that could disable the entire mechanism in combat. Shaw and the Seabees immediately began cutting and welding thick, quarter-inch steel plates to create a protective, armored shell around the differential housing. 4 days later, a second test was run in another minefield with the same setup. The tank completed the run, and this time, the added armor showed multiple impact marks but 0 penetrations. The modification had solved the vulnerability. Neeman submitted a written report to battalion headquarters detailing how the vehicle cleared 2 40-yard minefields in less than 5 minutes total, without casualties or exposing engineers to enemy fire. The battalion commander approved moving forward, and division scheduled a formal demonstration for high-ranking officers in late December. This was the flail tank's chance to prove its combat worthiness. The demonstration was set for December 28th. Neeman made sure the equipment was perfect, with chains replaced, the drive system tested, and hydraulics checked. Johnston practiced the controls until he could engage and disengage the flail smoothly. On the morning of the 28th, with chairs set up and the minefield ready, a critical problem arose. Johnston was missing. He was found completely incapacitated, having drunk through the night. Neeman had less than an hour to find a replacement to operate the untested equipment in front of general officers. He quickly grabbed a qualified corporal from another company who had driven Shermans since their deployment. Neeman gave the corporal a 10-minute crash course on the flail controls. About 30 senior officers, including a major general, full colonels, and battalion commanders, arrived at 7:45 and sat down, many looking skeptical. At 8 a.m., Neeman gave his briefing, explaining the mine problem on Saipan, 23 tanks lost in the first week, and engineers clearing at a rate of 10 yards under fire. He pointed to the Joker and factually walked the officers through the modification: the truck axle, the chains, the drive system, and the welded armor. The demonstration began. The replacement driver started the engine, engaged the flail, and the axle spun up with its distinctive roar. The Sherman moved into the minefield at a walking pace. Within seconds, the first mine detonated, followed by continuous explosions. The flail was triggering mines as it advanced, and the officers watched in silence as the tank disappeared into smoke and dust. 40 seconds later, the Sherman emerged on the far side, intact. Officers rushed forward to inspect the vehicle, examining the chains and the welded armor on the differential, which showed fresh impact marks. The Major General and senior officers conferred. The Major General then asked Neeman how many of these vehicles could be ready by February. Neeman explained they only had one, and building more required authorization and salvage parts. The general promised both. Division approved the immediate deployment of the existing flail tank to Iwo Jima with C Company, 4th Tank Battalion. The assault date was February 19, 1945.
The 4th Marine Division prepared for Iwo Jima throughout January. Intelligence painted a grim picture. 8 square miles of volcanic rock, dominated by Mount Suribachi, 3 airfields, and an estimated 21,000 Japanese defenders who had extensively fortified every cave, ridge, and approach. Lieutenant General Tademichi Kuribayashi, the Japanese commander, had abandoned the traditional beach defense for a deep defense of interconnected bunkers, tunnels, interlocking fields of fire, hidden artillery, and extensive minefields. American planners knew the assault of 70,000 Marines would be brutal. Neeman's flail tank presented a logistical problem, as it was the only diesel-powered Sherman in the battalion, which had converted to the M4A3 with gasoline engines. It required separate fuel and maintenance support. The tank was assigned to 2nd Platoon, C Company, and Sergeant Rick Haydex, an experienced commander who had fought on Saipan and Tinian, was put in command. Haydex practiced with the flail mechanism and received detailed instructions from the now-sober Johnston. The 4th Marine Division embarked from Maui in late January. The flail tank was secured in the hold of an LST. On February 19th, D-Day, the pre-invasion bombardment began at 0640 but failed to neutralize the Japanese defenses, which remained underground. The first wave hit the beaches at 0900. The volcanic ash on the beaches was worse than expected. Black sand so fine and soft that vehicles immediately sank. The 4th Tank Battalion started landing at 0930, but many Shermans bogged down in the ash. Neeman's flail tank, under Haydek's command, came ashore at 10:15. It struggled, but the added weight of the flail mechanism on the front actually helped prevent the bow from digging in too deeply in the 18-inch deep ash. By noon, 15 of the 23 Shermans ashore were operational, moving inland under Japanese artillery and mortar fire. The flail tank pushed toward Airfield No. 1, half a mile inland, which intelligence reported was surrounded by extensive minefields. C Company advanced slowly through the black, shifting ash, a landscape with no cover and invisible camouflaged Japanese positions. Engineers swept for mines, but every 100 yards took 15 minutes as enemy fire intensified. By 1400 hours, C Company had advanced 400 yards, and Airfield No. 1 was visible. Haydex spotted small red flags on wooden stakes 50 yards ahead, marking a line perpendicular to their advance. Based on his training, he assumed these were minefield markers and requested permission to engage the flail to clear a path. Permission was granted, and the bow gunner engaged the drive shaft, spinning the axle and chains. Unbeknownst to Haydex, the flags were actually range markers for Japanese heavy mortars, positioned 500 yards to the north, which had pre-registered fire on key features. When the flail tank moved toward the markers, Japanese observers reported the target. The first mortar round landed 20 yards short. Haydex ordered an increase in speed to get through the suspected minefield quickly. The third round was a direct hit 5 feet in front of the tank, cracking the driver's periscope. Multiple mortar positions began firing simultaneously, creating a barrage. Haydex ordered the driver to reverse, but the tracks only spun uselessly in the soft ash. The weight of the flail mechanism made the bow dig deeper into the volcanic sand, immobilizing them, under sustained mortar fire. Haydex shut down the flail to reduce the weight, but the tracks still failed to find traction. Fragments continued to hit the armor. They were stuck and had no way to get free without help. The flail tank's first combat mission was about to end in the volcanic ash. Another Sherman from C Company attached a tow cable and pulled Haydex's flail tank free after 20 minutes under continuous mortar fire. The flail tank withdrew to a protected position. The crew inspected the damage, multiple fragment impacts, and a cracked periscope, but the tank was still operational, and the flail mechanism was intact. That was the only time the improvised mine-clearing tank saw combat on Iwo Jima. The volcanic ash made mobility nearly impossible for heavily loaded vehicles, and the flail assembly added too much weight to the bow. Furthermore, the Japanese had positioned most of their mines on higher inland ground where the ash was even deeper. Engineers with metal detectors proved more effective in those specific conditions, despite their slower pace and higher casualty rate. The battle for Iwo Jima lasted 36 brutal days, ending on March 26, 1945, with nearly 7,000 Marines killed and another 20,000 wounded. Admiral Chester Nimitz famously stated that on Iwo Jima, uncommon valor was a common virtue. Neeman survived the battle and continued to command tanks through the end of the war, receiving the Navy Cross for his actions on Saipan. He left the Marine Corps in 1946 and died in 2003 at age 91. The flail tank, built from salvaged parts, never achieved the combat success Neeman had hoped for in that specific engagement. However, the concept was sound, and the American forces built more mine flails for the planned invasion of Japan, operations that were canceled after the atomic bombs ended the war. Modern mine-clearing vehicles still use rotating flails based on the same principle that Neeman and his mechanics improvised in a motor pool on Maui. The 4th Tank Battalion lost 33 Shermans on Iwo Jima, mostly to anti-tank guns and artillery, but they accomplished their mission, supporting the infantry and destroying fortifications. They kept moving forward.